Hello, Amy here of Harvest of Joy Farm. I'm out here in my kitchen garden next to my bean trellis. The weather forecast says rain coming in tomorrow and the next couple days, so I wanted to come out here and see if I had any of my seed beans that needed to be harvested. I've got these beans growing up on a trellis that's made of cattle panels tied to T-posts. And I really like growing beans on a trellis like that because it's nice and sturdy. I really like growing pole beans when I'm growing for dry beans or growing for seed because the vining habit of these beans going up this trellis means that as the seeds are maturing and the pods are drying down, they're held up off the ground, which means they can dry out more easily from the dews that we start to get in the fall and rains that we start to get in the fall. If you're growing bush beans for seed or for dry beans, you have to be a little more diligent about harvesting them, as soon as the beans start to mature and the pods start to dry down, because it's harder for them to dry out, right? And those pods underneath all that bush bean foliage can stay wet and then can be really susceptible to molds. But still, I don't want to leave my mature pods, dry pods, hanging out here too long in too many days of rain, because that sort of continual moisture on beans that are fully mature and dried down is just going to kind of swell them back up again, and they can wrinkle, and it will just decrease their viability. So, so I've got two species of beans growing next to each other here. You can kind of see both of them right here in this shot. On one side, I have a runner bean here, and on this side, I have a common bean. Runner beans and common beans are different species, so they will not cross-pollinate each other. So if you remember, different varieties of plants within the same species can share pollen and cross-pollinate, but plants that are in different species, their pollen is not compatible with the other species, right? So even if pollen from one of these beans got over on the other bean, it would not fertilize that bean. So so that way I can grow two types of beans right next to each other, and I can still save seeds for them. So over here we've got a painted lady runner bean, which is a bean with a beautiful, beautiful flower. You can see a couple are still remaining there. Bees and hummingbirds love them. It's a flat potted bean. Here's a nice clump of green ones. These are not anywhere near mature or dry, so I will not be picking them. When I'm looking to harvest beans for seed, I'm going to look for nice, long, well-filled out pods. And I'm going to look for the plants that produce the most nice, long, well-filled out pods. This here may have one really nice seed in it, but that is not a characteristic that I want to encourage in these beans. Rather, I'm going to look for pods that look more like this down here, where I've got 4 nice seeds, or at least it feels like that from the outside in this pod. Now this one here is ready to pick, and I can tell it's ready to pick because it's all nice and brown, and this where it joins onto the plant here is also brown. So this pod, I can feel it, it's a little flexible, right? There is no nutrition or energy or anything now coming into these beans. They are simply finishing their maturing and drying down process, but they're not bringing anything from the mother plant. So this is a pod that I can pick, and I'll leave it in the house to let it fully dry down, and then I will crack it open and thresh out the beans. Let's see if I can get one to show you here. There we go. There we go. Beautiful. This is a really meaty, hearty bean. It's got a great flavor. I love eating it in the wintertime when I'm cold and I really need something that's nourishing. So going over to this next this next section of trellis here. You see I've got a lot of beans hanging on this. This is a very productive variety. This variety of common bean is called Cherokee Trail of Tears. And the story that comes with this bean is that it was one of the seeds that was carried by the Cherokee people on the Trail of Tears, which, if you're not familiar with that history, look that up. That was the forced march of the Cherokee and other Native Americans westward from their home territories. And many, many people died along that march of starvation, of exposure, of disease. And I think about that when I grow these beans and when I harvest these beans. And I think about what it means to think forward, right, intergenerationally, right, to carry the future, you know, in your pocket or on your person, right, in the form of seeds, right, to be facing hunger and suffering and people around you dying, and still holding on to your seeds and protecting these seeds, and knowing that if there's a possibility for planting these seeds again, then there's a possibility for future generations to survive and to eat and to be nourished by them. And so I give thanks to the Cherokee people when I am growing these beans, and I think about my responsibility to their descendants, to the descendants of the people who carried these seeds, and think about what my responsibility is to help their descendants flourish in this world. So you can see I've got some beans in various stages of dry down here. So I've got some that are still green and greenish, right? So we've got some here that are still pretty green, pretty meaty, pretty juicy, right? As they start to mature more, they start to turn purple. But even these purple pods are pretty fleshy yet, right? There's a lot of water in these yet. These beans are not mature. They're not dried down yet. And you can see here, you see that? That's still green. That's still fleshy. There's still energy flowing through that into these seeds. So I don't want to pick these yet. This is too soon. All right, over here I've got one that's a little bit more dried down. It kind of looks green in that light, but it's actually brown, right? I've got some more over here that are even drier and browner. They're starting to wrinkle up a little bit, right? And so this is where I want to start harvesting them. These are fully ready to come off. You can see this stem is brown, right? There's nothing coming from the mama plant into this seed yet at this point, right? Same thing up here. There's nothing coming in from that mama plant into these seeds. So they're ready to come off and to dry in the house. And I'll try to... These black beans have the most amazing, delicious flavor. There we go. That's what they look like. If you can see those. Beautiful. All right, so keys when you're thinking about harvesting beans for seed. To recap, choose the beans for seed that are isolated from other beans of the same species, right? Even if it's by a few feet. Choose the seeds that are the pods that are fully mature from the plants that are producing the biggest, most beautiful, most filled out pods, right? Like this. Try to get your harvest off before rains, and harvest when your pods are fully dry. Moisture is the enemy of your seed beans. So even when I bring these into the house, I'm going to lay them out in a space where they're going to have good ventilation, and they're going to be able to dry down even further, and then I'll be able to thresh them out of the pods and store them for winter. All right, thanks for listening.